You remember on Paul's second missionary journey, he didn't leave Asia Minor until he had a vision of a man who was calling him to Macedonia. So Paul went to Philippi and Thessalonica and to Berea, and then down south to Athens, and then here to Corinth. When Paul was in Corinth in chapter 18 of Acts, it says that he was joined by Aquila and Priscilla, who were ordered to leave Rome because of the Emperor Claudius, who made a law that Jews needed to leave Rome. This was an early evidence of the kind of persecution and marginalization of the Jews in Rome. Paul went to see them, and because he was a tent maker, as they were, he stayed and worked with them. Every Sabbath, he reasoned in the synagogue, trying to persuade Jews and Greeks. And now listen to what happens in verse 5. When Silas and Timothy came from Macedonia, Paul devoted himself exclusively to preaching, testifying to the Jews that Jesus was the Christ. So I wanted to take you here to the agora, or the marketplace of Corinth, to think about where Paul and Aquila and Priscilla were selling their tents, or perhaps they were mending tents and even doing some leather work. This was the place where there were shops all around the Bema seat, and one shop behind me is extremely well preserved. Now, all of that is background for the book of Thessalonians, which Paul writes to them in Thessalonica from here. In the first book of Thessalonians, Paul says, "We loved you like a mother with her children, and you remember, brothers, our toil and hardship. We worked night and day in order not to be a burden to you." And then in 2 Thessalonians, he warns against idleness. "Keep away from every brother who's idle," he says. "We were not idle when we were with you, nor did we eat anyone's food without paying for it. On the contrary, we worked night and day, laboring and toiling so that we would not be a burden to any of you. We did this not because we do not have the right to such help, but in order to make ourselves a model for you to follow. If a man will not work, he will not eat." One of the messages for Paul here in Corinth is the same message he has in Thessalonians. Paul says he has the right to be supported by the ministry of the gospel, but he wants to demonstrate that he won't exercise that right, but instead be a self-supporting missionary team. Paul worked by himself, he worked with Aquila and Priscilla, and then when he had the help of some others on his team, here in Corinth, he was able to focus exclusively on the ministry of the gospel. So part of the message of Paul's ministry, led by example, is that everyone, while we wait for the return of Christ, should be taking care of our own needs and creating surplus to take care of the needs of others.